The house was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet I'd grown used to in recent months. Not peaceful, just empty. I sat at the kitchen table nursing my second cup of coffee, staring at the half-full plate of scrambled eggs Jessica had left behind. Her chair was still slightly pulled out, her lipstick-stained mug beside her plate. It was a picture-perfect scene of domesticity. If only it weren't a lie. Jessica had left for another one of her conferences, this time in Chicago. It's a 3-day marketing summit, she'd explained over dinner a week earlier, twirling her wine glass between her fingers. Big names, lots of networking. It's important I'm there. I'd nodded then, offering a small smile, but I'd already stopped believing her. It wasn't always this way. There had been a time, not too long ago, when I would have believed Jessica without question. She was my wife, the woman I'd married after 3 years of dating, the woman who had once planned elaborate surprises for my birthday and danced barefoot with me in our backyard after a bottle of cheap red wine. Back then, our world had been simple and small: weekend hikes, game nights with friends, whispered dreams about the future. But then Jessica's career had taken off. She'd landed a lucrative job at a marketing firm, the kind of role she'd dreamed of for years. I'd been proud of her, even when her hours got longer, even when she'd started traveling more frequently. I reassured myself that it was all for a better future, that the late nights and work calls were temporary sacrifices. Until they weren't. I don't remember the exact moment when the doubts crept in. Maybe it was the first time she cancelled date night for a work emergency. Maybe it was the second business trip in a single month. Or maybe it was the night she came home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. She'd brushed it off as a colleague's overzealous handshake and hurried off to shower, leaving me standing in our bedroom, staring at her discarded blazer. At first, I dismissed my feelings as paranoia. Jessica worked in a high-pressure industry. Of course she was busy. Of course she needed to network. Of course she didn't always have time for me. But the little inconsistencies began to pile up. A text message she'd hidden too quickly. A dinner receipt for 2 when she was supposed to be eating with a group. An unfamiliar name on her call history. The final straw came 2 months ago. Jessica had claimed to be at an out-of-town client meeting, yet my friend Sam spotted her at a trendy bar downtown. She wasn't alone. Sam hadn't wanted to tell me. I didn't want to cause trouble, man, but I pressed him until the truth came out. Jessica had been with a man, someone Sam didn't recognize, and they hadn't exactly been keeping things professional. I didn't confront her that night. I sat up late, staring at my wedding ring, replaying the past few months in my mind. Every cancelled date, every hurried phone call, every excuse about late meetings and work trips. The pieces fell into place, and I realized the life I thought I was living was a sham. The next day, I made a decision. If Jessica was lying to me, I needed to know the truth. Not just fragments and suspicions, but the whole, unvarnished truth. That's when I hired a private investigator. The investigator, a gruff man named Ron, came highly recommended. Discreet, thorough, and worth every penny, my friend assured me. Sitting across from Ron in a small, dimly lit office, I felt a pang of guilt. Hiring someone to spy on my wife felt like a betrayal of the man I used to be, trusting, optimistic, and maybe a little naive. But that man was gone, and I needed answers. "You're doing the right thing," Ron said, sliding a contract across the desk. "It's better to know than to live in the dark." 2 weeks later, I had my answers. Ron handed me a folder thick with evidence, photos of Jessica entering and leaving a boutique hotel, timestamped receipts for dinners and drinks, screenshots of text messages exchanged with her lover. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. The man's name was Eric. He was one of Jessica's colleagues, married with 2 kids. Ron's voice was distant as he explained the details. They've been seeing each other for at least 6 months. Mostly during her trips, but a few times locally. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter." I nodded numbly, my mind spinning. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of coming home to her kisses and her stories about work, all while she was sneaking around behind my back. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. I'd given Jessica everything, my love, my trust, my life, and she'd thrown it away. Over the next few weeks, my anger turned into determination. I couldn't change what Jessica had done, but I could decide how to handle it. I'd always been the calm, reasonable one in our relationship, the peacemaker who avoided conflict. But this time, there would be no avoiding it. I began to prepare. I scanned every piece of evidence Ron had gathered, memorizing dates and details. I made copies of the files and stored them securely. I reached out to Jessica's closest friends and family, casually planting seeds of doubt without revealing too much. "Have you noticed Jessica seems a little distant lately?" I'd ask, my voice tinged with concern. "I think work might be stressing her out." By the time Jessica left for her latest conference, I had everything in place. I watched her pack her suitcase with a practiced efficiency that made my stomach churn. She kissed me goodbye at the door, her smile warm and bright. "I'll call you tonight," she said, as if nothing was wrong. I stood on the porch, watching her car disappear down the street. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Tonight would be the beginning of the end. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the evidence spread before me. Photos of Jessica and Eric walking hand in hand, laughing over drinks, disappearing into a hotel room. Screenshots of text messages where they planned the next rendezvous, complete with emojis and declarations of love. It was all there, laid out in cold, undeniable detail. As the clock ticked past midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from Jessica: "Good night, love. Miss you already." I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. The audacity of her words made my blood boil. For months, she'd been playing me for a fool, pretending to be the devoted wife while sneaking off with another man. But not anymore. The game was over. I didn't reply. Instead, I slid the folder of evidence into a drawer and poured myself a drink. Tomorrow, I would start putting my plan into action. Jessica had built her house of lies brick by brick, but I was going to tear it down, and this time, there would be no rebuilding. For now, I let the silence settle around me, a quiet storm brewing in the darkness. The calm before the storm. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in months. This wasn't just about confronting Jessica, it was about taking control of my life again. She'd taken so much from me already, my trust, my peace of mind, but she wouldn't take my dignity. I started by organizing everything. The evidence was already categorized and stored, but now I added labels, timelines, and notes. It was meticulous, almost therapeutic, as if laying it all out could somehow ease the weight in my chest. I even created a backup drive and sent it to my lawyer, just in case things escalated. Then I turned my attention to her inner circle. Jessica had always prided herself on her network of friends and colleagues, people who admired her ambition and charisma. But admiration has a way of turning to pity, or disgust, when betrayal comes to light. I wasn't going to smear her name, but I wasn't going to protect her reputation either. I called her best friend, Emily, under the guise of concern. "Emily, have you talked to Jess lately?" I asked, my voice steady but tinged with worry. "She's been so distant, and I'm starting to think something's wrong." Emily's hesitation was brief but telling. I haven't noticed anything, Ethan. But I'll check in on her. Is everything okay?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Just let me know if she says anything. I think she's under a lot of stress." By planting those seeds, I ensured that when the truth came out, her closest allies would already be questioning her. It wasn't revenge, it was preparation. She'd built her life on lies, and I was just making sure the foundation was exposed. That afternoon, I made another call, this time to Eric's wife. Her name was Rachel, and she deserved to know the truth just as much as I did. The conversation was delicate, but I didn't hold back. "Rachel, my name is Ethan Carter," I began. I'm sorry to call you like this, but I have information about your husband that I think you need to know." Her silence was heavy, and I could almost hear her bracing herself. "What is it?" "He's been having an affair with my wife," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I have proof, and I'm willing to share it with you." Rachel's reaction was a mixture of shock, anger, and pain. We spoke for nearly an hour, sharing details and piecing together the timeline. By the end of the call, we had a plan of our own. She would confront Eric, and I would handle Jessica. Together, we'd ensure that neither of them could escape the consequences of their actions. That evening, I went through Jessica's things. Her favorite dresses, the shoes she'd worn on her so-called work trips, even the small trinkets she'd brought back as souvenirs. I gathered them all and placed them in a box. It wasn't anger driving me, it was resolve. She didn't deserve to keep the remnants of a life she'd already destroyed. As I stood there, surrounded by the physical evidence of her betrayal, I felt a strange sense of calm. Tomorrow, Jessica would come home, and everything she thought she knew would come crashing down. And for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. The day Jessica came home was one I'll never forget. I'd spent hours preparing, going over every detail of what I planned to say and do. There was no room for hesitation, no space for her lies. By the time her car pulled into the driveway, I was ready. She stepped out of the car, suitcase in hand, her face lit with a smile that might have once made my heart skip a beat. Now, it just made me sick. "Hi, love," she called, her voice as cheerful as ever. "I missed you." I didn't respond. Instead, I waited until she reached the door, her smile faltering as she noticed my expression. "Ethan, is everything okay?" "Come to the backyard," I said simply, my voice cold. Confusion flickered across her face, but she followed me. As we stepped outside, her eyes widened, and her breath hitched. There, in the center of the yard, was a roaring fire. Flames danced and crackled, devouring a pile of her belongings. Dresses, shoes, trinkets, all the physical evidence of her double life. "What the hell is this?" she shrieked, dropping her suitcase. "This," I said, gesturing to the fire, "is what happens when you betray someone who trusted you." Her face turned pale. "Ethan, what are you talking about? This is insane." "No," I snapped, my voice rising. "What's insane is you sneaking around with Eric for 6 months and thinking I wouldn't find out." Jessica's eyes widened further, panic setting in. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't," I said, cutting her off. "Don't insult me by lying. I have everything. Pictures, texts, receipts. Do you want me to go through it all for you? Or should I just email it to everyone you know?" Her hands trembled as she took a step back. "Ethan, please. Save it," I said sharply. "I've already spoken to Eric's wife. She knows everything, too. You don't get to play the victim here." Tears streamed down her face, but I felt nothing but disgust. "You threw away our marriage for what? Some cheap thrill? Did you even think about what you were doing? Or was I just too boring for you?" Jessica sobbed, trying to reach for me, but I stepped back. "Don't touch me. You made your choice." For the next hour, I laid everything bare. Every piece of evidence, every lie she'd told, every moment I'd spent doubting myself because of her deceit. She had no defense, no justification, just tears and apologies that meant nothing to me anymore. By the time I was done, she was a broken shell of the confident woman she used to be. And for the first time, I felt free. "I want you out of this house," I said finally. "You can take whatever's left of your things and go. I've already filed for divorce. My lawyer will be in touch." Jessica tried to protest, but I shook my head. "This conversation is over. You made your bed. Now lie in it." As she packed her bags, I watched her with a sense of closure I hadn't thought possible. The woman I'd loved was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. And as she drove away, I turned back to the fire, letting its warmth wash over me. The storm was over, and I had survived. When Jessica's car disappeared from the driveway for the last time, I stood in the silence of the aftermath. The house, once filled with her presence, now felt hollow but strangely peaceful. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells, questioning my reality or second-guessing every interaction. I had clarity, a painful clarity, but clarity nonetheless. I spent the rest of that evening cleaning up the remnants of her departure. The fire in the backyard had died down to embers, and I methodically raked through the ashes, ensuring that nothing remained. It felt symbolic, a cleansing ritual to mark the end of this chapter. When I finally stepped back inside, the house seemed lighter, as though it had been holding its breath for far too long.